child diagnosed with RAD overcome this brain dysfunction to become functioning adults. So we're going to address dysfunction of the brain as dysregulation in the brain, where the brain is just not regulated to function in the appropriate manner. So we're replacing the word with dysregulation. So Roxanne, were you going to talk a little bit about the amygdala at this point?
Yeah, I can do that. So I can draw you my little alien that I draw all the time because I am not an artist. And so what I'm going to do is kind of show you what that trauma reaction looks like in the brain. So what I'm going to show you is what looks like in the brain as a trauma reaction. So right here in the midbrain is what we call the amygdala. And this amygdala actually, it records everything that has happened to you that is connected with your senses. We learn everything that we know through our senses. So if anything in our environment even remotely reminds this little guy right here, he gets activated. And the activation starts this trauma reaction. So and right here, we have the hippocampus. And this is the amygdala. And here is the prefrontal cortex. These are all important. There are other parts of the brain that are involved in a trauma reaction, but I only want to deal with these three parts because this is the kind of the chemical reaction that happens in the brain. And so, so this amygdala, let's just say, let's give an example of a child whose father is an alcoholic, and he goes out drinking on benches, and he comes home and he smells like alcohol. When he's a mean drunk, and he comes home and he's aggressive, he hurts people, and then he sometimes will be sexually inappropriate with this child. So this child all of a sudden sees and smells and hears and feels this trauma that has happened before. This is a past trauma and an ongoing trauma. Okay, so
Trigger.
It's a trigger. So the amygdala gets fired up. The hippocampus, which is responsible for short-term memory, other things too, but we're going to just talk about the short-term memory. This is really a pared down example here. So, but the hippocampus comes in here and wants to help. So it shuts down the short-term memory. Okay, this is important because so then we start getting cortisol levels start to rise, and it comes over here to try to rescue the amygdala. Well, it doesn't work because the cortisol starts to fill in this brain, and it starts to pool right here in the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is about making, is executive functioning, making decisions, connections with people, okay? So you also have your thinking part of your brain up here. And it is involved, but we're not going to talk about it. So the prefrontal cortex also shuts down. So there's no connection. There's no short-term memory. All you have is this chemical reaction going on in the brain. So when your child has a trigger in the environment, so they're walking down the street and they smell somebody who just came out of a bar and had a beer, and they can smell this stuff so fast. Kids are hyper vigilant. when all adults are,
Hypersenses.
and hypersensitive when they have had some trauma. So this child is walking down the street with a parent, they're having a great time, and somebody walks by who smells like alcohol. That child is going to go into this reaction. They're going to get angry. They're going to get into fight, flight, or freeze mode. This is what causes fight, flight, or freeze. And you have heard that many times. Okay. So people have 3 different ways that they may react to this kind of reaction. The only way to calm this is to take a child out of that environment, and we're going to try to decrease the cortisol so that this reaction is not happening. Everything starts to return to normal. Okay. Problem with frequent trauma that continues over and over again is these cortisol levels don't really go down very much in between episodes. And
So
what
your
happens
executive functioning
and
is,
yes, and so we have kids that we see who've had a lot of trauma that this cortisol has pooled up in the prefrontal cortex, right in the front of the brain. And because this is the last part of the brain to be formed and to mature, we start down here in the brainstem, and our maturity goes this way.
and hopefully by age 24, the brain's fully
Or
developed.
30.
Or 30.
Yeah.
Depending on trauma.
Exactly. And how much.
Cortisol is in there interfering.
And so it pulls here. It also creates holes in this part of the brain, which, by the way, can be recovered. But what we have to do is get a child into a consistent, safe, nurturing environment where this frequent reaction is not happening.
Or at least where within that safe environment, the caregivers can recognize the triggers and address them as they either are coming toward the child or have already been activated in the child. They can recognize the triggers.
Yes. So this is that trauma reaction that you might see. You know, you can have a kid walking in Walmart down the aisle, and all of a sudden they see something, hear something, smell something, whatever that triggers them. And then all of a sudden they're laying out in the floor screaming and yelling and angry. And what do? You're sitting there going,
What happened?
what just happened?
Mhm.
And it's because this has happened. And this is split second stuff.
And it still happens in adults.
It does
but
happen in
not
adults.
healed from traumas.
That's right.
Mhm.
Working with an adult right now who very often she will hear me say something that somebody has said in the past to her. And interestingly enough, some of these things have been therapists that have said these things to her that have caused trauma. And that's a very sad situation,
Yes.
honestly. And she goes immediately into this reaction.
Fight, flight.
And so I recognize it very quickly, and we start to bring this down.
De-escalate.
Yes, de-escalate it. So this, again, is my little alien that is going to show you that this is what happens in the brain, and kids can recover. People can recover really quickly if you get them into an area that's quieter, not stressful,
Softer.
not triggering, and let me say, it's important that you don't touch a person, depending on their history, when they're in this reaction, because that can be misinterpreted.
If you have foster children, you don't know their history.
That's right. Not always.
Not always.
You don't know all of it for sure. So, but make sure that the child knows that you are there and you are here, and you can be beside them. And you can say, when you are ready, we can talk about this. Because I can tell you, when this hippocampus shuts down, they can't tell you why they're doing what they're doing.
No.
And when I work with kids who really have a lot of triggers, I explain this to them. I said, this is why you do what you do. And so we need to be able to identify those triggers so that you can maybe not have so many of these episodes.
Yeah, this won't work until this is calm.
That's right. This has to go back to normal. So there is your lesson in
Dysfunction and dysregulation.
that's right.
The dysregulation that creates the dysfunctioning
That's right.
or maladaptive behaviors.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Okay.
all I wrote on my chart on that one was, Roxanne, this is time to explain the alien and the amygdala.
And there
Yes.
you go.
There it is. So that's a wrap for me, Roxanne, unless you have anything else.
Yeah, I think this is, we will end today with this one. And like we said earlier, we are going to be offering several more trainings and discussions and bringing in other professionals. And just look that up and watch on our website, Denver Therapy and Consultation.com. And we're putting out quite a few things right now, little articles here and there that might be helpful as well. And Bev, I might ask you, you were talking about that one article
Yes.
a while ago.
Mhm.
We can put that on the website,
Yes.
so
yes.
you don't have to worry about bringing
Yes.
it next time.
Yes.
And we can add that in.
It's more, yeah, it's the grief and loss of parents with children with mental illness,
Yes,
because
very
there is a
important.
huge grief and loss
Yes.
element there.
So thank you for joining us today, and I hope you'll join us in the future. And we really enjoyed being here.
It was fun. Thank you.